Ladies and gentlemen, we welcome you back to this to the next session number 5 for today, the day 1 of the MADAD Ummah Summit. And tonight we will be talking about title "Education is the Lost Property of the Muslim World." Tonight we will be having Professor Emeritus Tan Sri Dzulkifli Abdul Razak. Okay, before we begin, I would like to introduce a little bit background of our speaker tonight. Can I address you as Professor? Okay. Okay. Professor Tan Sri Dzulkifli Razak is currently the rector of IIUM, International Islamic University, Malaysia. Among his feats are Tan Sri Zul is the first Asian to receive the prestigious 2017 Gilbert Medal and the 7th internationally from Universitas 21, a group of renowned research-intensive universities focused on fostering global citizenship and encouraging institutional innovation. He is a renowned scholar and an academic, and I believe tonight will be an enlightening session. We will talk about education and research. With that, ladies and gentlemen, I would like to pass the microphone to Tan Sri. Please welcome.
Let me thank you, first of all, for this invitation. I know you had a long day since 4 o'clock this afternoon. And I think this is one of the second last session. If I'm not mistaken, there's another one after this. Now, I'm honored to be given this very exciting yet controversial theme, education and research, the lost property of the Muslim world, if I'm not mistaken. So if I can have the slides. I've got a few slides to share with you. Then it will facilitate our discussion since we are going to be talking for maybe a half an hour or so, and then we will have the question and discussion. So are you able to see this?
Yeah, we can see it.
Okay, so education, to me, education includes research, includes teaching, includes public discussion and so on and so forth. So it's merangkum lah altogether. Yeah. The lost property of the Muslim world, I put a question mark because I'm not too sure whether it is actually a lost property of the Muslim world. We need to answer that at the end of the session, inshallah. But I want to use a very typical case for us to understand so that it becomes very specific in this example. And I want to go back to the days of the Andalusia. This is about the 10th century period where Muslims were at the peak of civilization, including education, as it were. Now, for those of you who are not familiar with IIUM, IIUM is also now recognized by the United Nations University as a regional center for expertise for sustainable development. And this is one of the pride and joy of the university as we move forward, particularly the alumni who have not been to the university for a long time. All right. So this will be my general outline. We will try and understand what Islamic civilization is all about in Andalusia and what is the so-called quote-unquote property that we have got in the context of education. We'll look at some examples, whether this level of education is something that we can sustain and move forward as we go into it. And therefore, what are the characteristics of this education that we talked about, how different it is from the one that we are having today. For those of you who have been in IUM or other universities, what is the difference between then and now? And what will be the frame of experience that we want to move forward before we answer the question whether it is a lost property of the Muslim world as such? Yeah? So we will cover roughly about the period of 711 That's when the first time Muslims get into Andalusia, or even change it into Andalusia, into Cordoba, and finally when the empire, or when the what you call the Khalifa collapsed in about 1400s, hundreds or so. So within this experience of 700 to 800 years, what can we learn from this experience in the context of education, right? So why Andalusia? Andalusia, I think, is kind of a very unique experience where Muslim actually went into a place in Europe, which is then Spain. And as you can see from that diagram here, the first half of the diagram showed about the areas where the Muslims, the Umayyad particularly, occupies Andalusia, which is Spain, about 2/3 of Spain, and another what you call 10 years, another the 10th century, we'll find that it occupies a lot more. Now, this started from a gentleman called Abdul Rahman III, who actually moved from the Baghdad into this area and begin to quote unquote occupy the Spanish peninsula at that particular time. At its peak, we find that almost all of Spain were occupied by the Muslim, and it is called the Caliphate. I mean, people think that Caliphate in the modern times is not possible. This is around 700, we still have a Caliphate, and you can see the green areas is where the Muslims occupy and make this into a kind of a center of education, if you will, a peak of knowledge as far as Islam is concerned, right? So why do I took Andalusia? It's almost a kind of a transformation, that the Muslim went into a place which is non-Islamic and changed it into a very well-known Islamic sort of a place as far as education is concerned, right? So you can see this is a kind of movement from the days of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam at the Hijaz in Saudi Arabia, and then we go into the days of the Sahaba, which is the orangey color, right? And then we begin to move into the Umayyad sort of area, and this is where at the year 1711, I like you to remember when you see 711, that's when the time the people cross over from the tip of North Africa into Spain, yeah, and start to move from Cordoba to Toledo to Alhambra and so on and so forth, and occupied almost all this whole area and renamed the southern part of it as Andalusia. Yeah, they stopped just at the border of Europe, right? Whereas these are all the Muslim areas, and this is where we want to study what has happened during that particular time, right? Now, to make it short, because we just have half an hour or so, you can see the kind of contribution. I just take one example, Ibn Khaldun. Ibn Khaldun is known as the first historian that writes this book, Muqaddimah, I'm sure you know, and talks about how we can explain the growth of civilization, the decline of civilization, so much so Toynbee, which is also a very prominent scholar, and described it as a philosophy of history, which undoubtedly the greatest works of its kind. And this is way back at the 1300. People still regard this as the greatest work of its kind that has ever been created by any mind at any time or any place. Coming from a non-Muslim, I think there is something that we need to ponder and see what is it that Ibn Khaldun has done to be the first historian to understand what civilization is all about. Yeah. There's another name here, Idrisi. Idrisi is also from that area. And as you can see, Idrisi drew a map. And this is the map of Spain, but it is inverted. It is Saudi Arabia. Saudi Arabia looks inverted because Idrisi drew a map in such a way that the southern hemisphere actually is in the north and the northern hemisphere is in the south. Yeah? Dia lebih kurang terbalik. Kalau kita tengok Google Map, is something like this. Normally you find it's the peninsula dia ke bawah, no, dia di atas, so much so that Spain is somewhere here, right? And Idrisi drew this map so much so, it's so detailed that when he drew Alexandria, there is a lighthouse here that is in 1100. He managed to detect that, and that lighthouse, if you go to Alexandria, the lighthouse is still there. I'm trying to show you how detailed our scholar is when they undertake some sort of an activity that relates to knowledge. That's one of the criteria that I think is important in this particular respect. All right, these are people. I mean, these are names that you will be very familiar with. Just to show you, these are not just names, but there are personalities behind those particular names, and these personalities are well known as such. Right. There's not only Muslims. There is a Jewish scholar. All right, Jewish scholar which is very well known, Rabbi Moshe Maimun. He is another scholar that also learned about Islamic world together with the Jewish world. Okay, he is trained as in medicine in Cordoba and becomes the wazir and also the al-qadi to the sultan at that particular time. Again, giving you an impression during that time, we are not just talking about Muslims. I think that the sad part about Islam now today, when we talk about Muslim, we just talk about Muslim as though the non-Muslim do not matter, or we are very suspicious over the non-Muslim. Here is a case as this guy talk about Islam and understand Islam from the perspective that he knew as a Jew, and took even what's called almost a Muslim name as such, Imran Musa Al-Maimun. So these are again trying to give you a kind of a perception of what the Muslim world at that time looks like before we can judge whether we have lost it ataupun tidak. Yeah? Okay. These are another group of people. I think I've talked about Al-Drisi, there's Ibn Zur, Ibn Rushd. Why I take this? Because these are people who have got also a Western name on it. Misalnya Ibn Rushd, it is known in the Western world as Averroes. Ibn Sina, what do you call Avicenna? Yeah, Idrisi, it's called Dresses. All right, Avenzoar, Ibn Zur. Now, why do I take this? Because these are the prominent scholars that the Western world give them a Western name. They recognize these fellows as a Western scholar rather than a Muslim scholar, and therefore give them a Western name. They want to claim this as part of the Western civilization that other people probably do not think this is as important as they think as far as this name is concerned. So this kind of name, and Ibn Khaitam also, yeah, ada namanya Al-Zahan, and they give this, and he's again another figure that developed scientific method before people like Galileo Galilei does it. So again, I want to show to you that these are prominent scholars, not only prominent scholars, but original thinkers. Yeah, dia tak mengikut-ikut saja. They just don't follow what other people do. They create something new and contribute to knowledge as an original scholar, not a copy from somebody else and claiming this to themselves, right? So that is the kind of an environment that we were in, yeah. And what is it that makes them so different? Why are they able to do that then, which is 10th century, in the 10th century, we are in the 20th century. Why are we not able to do it now? Our numbers are bigger, our technology is better, communication is even better, you know. Why are they able to do this? And they've got a different principle of understanding. Yeah. One is they've got this wala ghalib illallah, means to say that there is no victory other than from God. Kita punya masalah ni, we always claim the victory is ours. And sometimes kita berkelahi pula. Yeah? For them, the victory comes from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and that's it. All right? And because of that, their attitudes are very different. What are their attitudes? They are a very broad-based, open system. You know, they study many things that they could be studied. They don't stop at one discipline. We political scientists and then it's normal scientists and all those things, we have got a discipline. And the discipline kita berbagi-bagi pula. Physics, chemistry, biology, anthropology, socially. But they don't. The base is very broad. And they study as an open system, no copyrights and all those things. So their mind is really a very, what we call versatile, and also a very active mind as such. Yeah, and they are very mobile. They move from place to place, right? In the context of mobility, and this is why exchanges, visiting other people, visiting other scholars, and often when they visit scholars, they exchange books. They exchange papyrus or whatever it is. We are talking about exchanging books just now. That is the habit of it. They don't stay in one spot. They keep on going across and learning from other people, and also acquiring knowledge while also exchange knowledge from other people. For that, they are very tolerant. Doesn't matter where they go, they can adapt to an environment. Kita kadang-kadang go into overseas, we still want to find a place where there orang Melayu banyak. Makan makanan halal atau kadang-kadang makanan Melayu pun ada. Even though we go to other places across, we are not tolerant over the places. And that needs courage. Courage of how to be tolerant and how to live in an environment which probably is alien to us. And these are the scholars that are able to do that. Yeah, I was mentioned the original thinkers, they are scholars. They are more than just educated people. They come up with ideas to help people understand. They are polymaths. Polymaths maknanya they can garner a number of disciplines. Al-Kindi, for example, know 14 disciplines. All right, beginning from music to mathematics to philosophy to pharmacy, and has written many books. Al-Kindi alone wrote 200 books at that particular time. And this is what we call transdisciplinarity, which is coming back into our education system. Given the COVID environment, given sustainable development, you cannot just master one discipline if you want to understand what it's all about. You have to be transdisciplined. And these people are there. As mentioned, they write book. Otherwise, they translate other people's book into our language or into Arabic at that particular time, regardless of where they come from. If it's a useful knowledge, then they will translate it. They're open, they're balanced, yeah, and they're internationally recognized. And that's why the name I was mentioning just now, if you're good, they'll give you a Western name. They'll recognize you, not only in terms of your work, they want to give you a different name so that they belong to that Western culture rather than the Muslim culture alone. And for that, they have got what they call the Baitul Hikmah or House of Wisdom, where everything is collected under one roof. Translation, teaching, research, and all those things, including astrology and so on and so forth, are all under one roof. And that's Baitul Hikmah. I think most of us know about it. Yeah, it's a major intellectual center of the Islamic Golden Age. Where is the intellectual center of the Golden Age of the Muslim now? Yeah, it is called the House of Wisdom, Baitul Hikmah. Wisdom is never talked in our university. We talked about the knowledge. Sometimes the knowledge has no wisdom. Kita berkelahi about the knowledge because there's no wisdom in that knowledge. Yeah, and this is again the other way of looking at how the Muslim punya educational level is far surpassing what we know. So much so dalam buku ni dia kata how the Arab transformed the Western civilization. This is a major task. So maknanya if the knowledge belongs to the Muslim, all right, we have not lost it to a certain extent, but it's given to another civilization. Yeah, dia menzahirkan satu lagi tamadun yang lain menggunakan ilmu-ilmu orang Islam. We have transferred that knowledge from our community to another community. We have not lost it, but it's owned by another community. So it depends on how you want to interpret whether it is lost ataupun tidak. Yeah, the knowledge is the same. They have taken it and they have developed it further. Science and technology misalnya, kalau tidak ada orang seperti yang mana yang saya tunjukkan tadi, there probably be no modern science and technology. If it's not because of the Muslim, at that time, researching, writing, translating books from other culture to be given to the so-called Western civilization that we owned. You can see how Baghdad was organized then. Yeah? A fantastic sort of impression of what Baghdad in the 10th century during the time of Andalusia at the same time. There's a river Tigris that goes through. Here you can see from the map how it is very well organized. It is not like Baghdad today or any of the Muslim cities today. You go to the Muslim cities today, Kelang Kabut, when you look at this, it is very organized, and that's what it is as far as the Muslim world is concerned. And I just want to show you this. This is just basically headgear. Yeah, you look at the headgear, they are all very different. I want to bring the idea that it is multi-diverse group. Kita kalau kita nampak, kita pakai satu jenis songkok je. But here look, yeah, kalau macam hijab ataupun tudung tu satu jenis saja. But here look, there are multi ways of doing it. To show the richness of culture, to show the richness of creativity, to show the tolerance in terms of accepting other people's being and also respecting their way of doing things. And that respect, I think, is another point that we need to think about in our Muslim context. Are we that tolerant in trying to understand or to accept other people in our fold. Ini orang Islam saja mungkin, yeah. What about the non-Muslims and so on and so forth, yeah. The kind of recreation that they are involved in. They don't get involved with TikTok, neither they get involved with just social media. They play an intellectual game. This is chess. It doesn't come from Islamic culture. Came from another culture that play this game. And it's not only the men, also the women play the same thing. I just want to give you another impression that the environment is highly intellectual and highly cultural also at the same time. This is an example of an ivory piece, yeah, for chess, and this was found in Andalusia during the 10th and 11th century. So I hope I can give you a very simple idea of what the Muslim world then was in with respect to knowledge and with respect to education. Yeah, but the acceptance ataupun the acknowledgement of us on some of these things do not commensurate with what they have. This a work that was done by Peter Adamson mengatakan many of the contribution of the Muslims do not go appreciated or is not appreciated or is not acknowledged beyond a certain thing. Right? The understanding was basically we talk about it's just about the Islamic influence on European philosophy rather than a contribution per se. It is more than just an influence, it is a contribution as such. And this is something that we want to discuss afterwards, after the discussion when we talk about whether we have lost it or not. I would want to just finish off with this one. Yang menunjukkan this a painting by Raphael, yeah, somewhere in the Vatican. And if you look at these pictures here, you can name everybody. This is Socrates, this is Plato, and Aristotle is also here. This is Pythagoras. Pythagoras is somewhere here. All right. And if you look at this now, these are all Europeans. Yeah. Except for one person, this guy here. This is Ibn Rushd. Yeah. As I mentioned to you, Ibn Rushd got accepted in this environment of only the Western because he is considered quote unquote almost Western. Because his contribution is so high, and they respected him, and they gave him this name Averroes, and he put him into this kumpulan orang Barat as a kind of a scholar. They accept the scholar, but they don't accept his identity as a Muslim or as a non-European. Right? Now, this was the time when we find that the European culture begin to develop their own university. Yeah. And I want to take you back to 1088, where the first university of Bologna, first university in Europe, University of Bologna, was created in Italy, right? And where they start to also teach. Look at how they teach. It's almost like how we teach in schools now. Yeah, this is a lecturer, and these are the students, right? And the student can also sleep. I think some of you sleep in class when you were a student, I guess. Yeah, but this is a kind of arrangement. This arrangement has not changed. You go to any university now, this is how we are arranged. It's lecturer depan, the student belakang, and they interact in that particular sense. So we begin to understand what education is all about from this context. We do not have how the way the Muslim organize their classes, and there's no documentation as far as I know. Yeah? So if you look at the whole sequence, mula daripada the Greek, yeah, before the modern era, until the 21st century, it is the University of Bologna in the 11th century that I've mentioned to you, right? Now, from the University of Bologna, then they develop a lot more ideas of what the Renaissance is, what the Industrial Revolution is, what is modern day civilization, and for each, I think they have got reasons why they want to do this. Renaissance, misalnya, give birth to industry, industrial revolution, scientific revolution, and then they have this voyage of discovery where they spread their influence into different places, at the same time exploit and also colonize some of these places. Yeah, and finally they have got another own civilization that they do not believe in God anymore. They believe in humanism, they believe in utilitarianism, that is part and parcel of how they use knowledge to influence other people or to expand their civilization, as it were. This is where we understand how we understand what knowledge is now in the modern in the modern era. Yeah, and what actually happens is basically they are trying to transfer all the things that they will learn from the Greeks and the Roman and build a new renaissance. Renaissance ni maknanya rebirth. Yeah, this has gone, this has died in the civilization, and the European world is trying to rebuild it again. And this is why it's called renaissance, maknanya rebirth, menzahirkan semula apa yang ada. And if you study this in depth, you find that many of the architecture in Europe are architecture that takes from the Greeks and the Romans. The big pillars that we see, kadang-kadang kita pun pakai pillar ni, but these are the Roman and the Greek pillars that they took so that they can be reminded of what their civilization was in the West during that particular time before the civilization collapses, right? An important point, yeah, but there is no other activities that they will recognize, and therefore they call it the Dark Ages. Other civilization, as far as they are concerned, does not come into picture, which is not true. I want to now show you in my last slide here what is the influence of other civilizations like Islam, the Chinese, and the Indian civilization. Yeah? So if you peel this through, kalau kita lihat lebih mendalam apa yang berlaku, sebenarnya before the Bologna University, there is already a wave of knowledge, delivery, information coming from civilization, yeah? Other civilization. From the 7th century, for example, the Indian and the Chinese already begin to influence other parts of the world, including part of Muslim sort of country. So you talk about China, misalnya. That's why there are a huge minority of Muslim there, because they are part and parcel of that influence that comes through. And then you have then the Muslim, and this is where the Andalusian punya civilization from the 10th century moving on to the other side, and then it rejoins. And ini what I said just now. So when you talk about the loss, it is not actually lost. It is taken by other civilization and built into the civilization, right? And in fact, if you were to look at it, the first university that was created among the first is the University of Nalanda in India. But this university collapses. They cannot find the university now. But the University of Karawayin in Fez is still there, all right? In other words, as far as UNESCO is concerned, the first university in the world that is still existing is this university, built in 859 by a woman called Fatimah Al-Fed. In other words, the knowledge stock of the Muslim are invested in this particular university, yeah, and you can see during that particular period of the 7th century to the 12th century, lebih kurang, what is the Muslim contribution? You can see from there. Al-Ghazi, right to Al-Quf, these are the scholars that go on contributing, yeah, despite the so-called Dark Ages that the Western labeled. They refuse to recognize there's Muslim punya expansion of knowledge from that period of the Dark Ages. In other words, the University of Karawayin at that particular time are producing scholars and giving scholarship to other parts of the world. Another good example is during medicine. Hippocrates during 489, right? After that, the next scholar, Western, is Vesalius, right? But in between there is Avicenna, Ibn Sina, and Ibn Sina writes his book on the canon in 934. And it lasted for almost 432 years. The influence of his writing lasted almost more than 400 years. And by the time the last Western scholars, yeah, came into the scene, he recognizes. So William Osler mengatakan Avicenna as the author of the most famous medical textbook ever written, and Avicenna canon of medicine remained a medical Bible for a longer time than any other work. All right, and he continues to say that as a practitioner, it was a prototype of a successful physician who was at the same time statesman, teacher, philosopher, and literally man. Ini yang saya katakan tadi, ya. Dia bukan saja doktor, tetapi dia juga statesman, ya. Dia juga teacher, dia juga philosopher, dan juga literature. People learns in literature. And this was a lecture that Osler gave in 1913. All right. So my point, I want to stop here just to recap. Yeah, we produce knowledge. The Muslim produced knowledge. The Muslim also shared this knowledge to other parts of the world in a sense that it also built another civilization. So walaupun the enlightened world of Islam as far as knowledge is concerned is no longer there, but in substance, what the Muslim has done is now captured by other universities. So you cannot talk about Oxford, you cannot talk about Cambridge, you cannot talk about Harvard without recognizing that there is only a Muslim sort of contribution. All right. This is a good book that all of you must read if you're interested in this title, called The Theft of History by Jack Goody, who is, I think, the emeritus professor in Cambridge. And he wrote this book by saying that he's a highly influential critic of what he sees as a pervasive Eurocentric Occidentalist bias of so much Western history that is a consequence of a theft by the West of other achievements of other culture in the invention of democracy, capitalism, individualism, and so on and so forth. What Jack Goody is trying to say, this Western culture or Western civilization took this knowledge from other civilizations, notably the Muslim, and claimed this as theirs. They didn't recognize, they did not cross-reference that this comes from the Muslim, and the names that are given, Idrisi baik, Ibn Khaldun baik, but they say this is ours. But in actual fact, it belongs to the Muslim. So from my point of view, it's a world that is not lost. It's a world that is there, a knowledge base that is there. But we Muslim now must recognize this knowledge, take it back, and then develop it further to be part and parcel of what the Muslim contribution to knowledge and education moving forward in the 21st century. So on that note, let me stop. I think there's already half an hour. Maybe we can have some discussion given some of the things that I've mentioned to you a while ago. So wabillahi taufiq wa hidayah. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi ta'ala wabarakatuh.
Waalaikumsalam warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Thank you, Professor, for the enlightening and very academic presentation. I believe that you have answered your own question of education. Is it the lost property of the Muslim Ummah?
Yes. You agree or not?
I personally agree with what you have said. You didn't give a definite answer, but you gave a question, yes, whether or not it is a lost property of the Muslims.
Yes.
Well, from your presentation, we have not lost it. It is that another civilization took what the Muslims have developed and made it more advanced.
Exactly.
That is what I got from your presentation.
And but the question is, if you take a position that we have not lost it, so the question is, what is our role? For example, if you young scholars go and do PhD in London, in wherever, what will be your role? Will be your role trying to recover the knowledge that the former Muslim scholars has given and take it back and rejuvenate it, give it a new interpretation? What is it that we do? Or we just take this and come back with another degree and then, that's it? I think that's a question that I want to throw back to the audience. As a Muslim educators, Muslim scholars, what is our next role now once we decide whether the knowledge is lost ataupun tidak? It's not just a talk now. I think what is our action for the Ummah moving forward?
Well, it is actually the responsibility of young people to quote unquote take back what is ours.
Yes, reclaim.
Develop what has been developed by the Muslims. And you mentioned about the previous scholars, they were polymaths.
Yes.
Multidisciplinary. I believe we have a lack of scholars who are contemporary scholars, 21st century, that are polymath. I cannot mention the names because we have a lack of scholars.
Yeah. So
maybe you can mention some names, contemporary scholars that are polymaths
in our midst.
Yeah.
It's difficult to mention. But my point is this. So for example, now if you go to and do your PhD and you're supposed to do a PhD in political science, okay, that's fine. But would you also venture as a Muslim scholar to do some other things to complement your political science beyond what you are required to do? You know, yeah. So walaupun kita dibagi scholarship untuk do, if myself lah, I'm given a scholarship to do science, right? But do I go and do social science? Do I listen to lectures on humanities? Do I learn religion at the same time? So I have a resemblance of a polymath, may not be a polymath, so that I can understand science better, because I have other knowledge that supports me. And this is what I am supposed to do, to combine wahyu, reveal knowledge and reason. It's not now, to me, it's not just between religious and non-religious knowledge, but between arts and science.
Yeah.
Are we able to combine this so that we also can act like the scholars of the past as far as Islam is concerned? Or do we just say, aku nak habis sudah je, as long as I can finish, never mind. You know, whatever I take back is not important. I just want the PhD so that I can work with another university, makan gaji, beli rumah besar, beli kereta besar, and that's it. What is the attitude of scholars, Muslim scholars particularly, when you go for this kind of further studies of activities that is related to knowledge? That is a question, I think, that again we need to question in moving into the new world.
It will take a toll on yourself, because you see, Prof, my wife is currently pursuing her PhD.
Okay.
In material science. She's a scientist.
Okay.
But the challenges that she is facing only to do her PhD is very challenging. I kind of imagine somebody else doing multiple PhDs. It would take a genius who has powerful endurance just to accomplish that feat.
Yeah. What you are saying, basically, most of the Muslim scholars before us are genius.
Yes, they were geniuses.
Yes. If the Muslim scholars before us are genius, what are we?
Well, we have to strive to be as good as them.
Exactly. So maknanya we are already, just like the Quran say, we are the best of Ummah.
Yeah.
You know. So if they can do it, why can't we do it? It may take a different kind of a struggle, but I think we can do it. Now the world is telling us this. You want to solve the COVID-19 problem, you need to talk in terms of different discipline. You just put a doctor alone, he will not be able to solve the problem. They need to talk to social scientists. They need to talk to other group of people. They need even to talk to the lay public and how to solve this problem, because it's a worldwide global problem. No one has got a solution. Everybody must sit together to find a solution. You talk about climate change. A physicist cannot solve this problem. Neither a biologist, nor a political science, nor a politician. We need to sit together. So this whole idea, what our own scholars has been doing, is the way of the future. So if you're telling me that these people, they do because they are genius, and we cannot do it because we are genius, then forever we will not be able to solve this problem. Forever we will be living in a world that we are actually put at the mercy of whatever. It could be the virus, it could be the environment, it could be even, other things that we can imagine before. Now, what does that make us? We are supposed to be the best of Ummah. We are supposed to be the most knowledgeable as far as God's creation is concerned. Now we become a victim of an environment that we created for ourselves.
Okay, Professor.
Yep.
I think we are now at the Q&A session. I would like to read the questions that people have asked in the live.
InsyaAllah.
I find a question by Datin Suraya quite interesting.
Okay.
I want to read it. Okay. Assalamualaikum yang berbahagia Tan Sri Prof. As an animal activist for quite many years, I like to ask you as a scholar and academician, what do you think about divine economy? As a conventional and capitalist thinkers are more pro to Western human-centric and materialistic concept of sustainable development goals, lacking of spiritual and moral values. What is your view, Prof?
Okay. Can I just start off with what we think, or at least what I think in IUM when we talk about maybe you talk about sustainable development. Okay. Our concept on sustainable development is basically just a material concept. Yang maknanya we talk about sustainable development. Why? Because we want to sort of survive as a community that are very much focused on economy. And that's why when you define sustainable development, we talk about sustainable development as a balance between economy, the planet, and people. Yeah, economy, planet, and people, or prosperity, people, and planet, all the three P's. All right. Now, in the context of the sustainable development, you need other disciplines to come into play. This is what we discussed with you just now. How to take other discipline at the same time. Yet, it is just about physical development. We have not even talked about spiritual development when all research are showing that why we are undergoing into this kind of a trouble today in terms of global warming, climate change. The reason is because the human being is the main cause of this problem. The major cause is a human being, right? And therefore, what is the human being from our point of view, our perspective is not only the physical person, it's also the spiritual person, right? Yet when you look at sustainable development, there's very little thing on spirituality. And that is why, if I can show you the book, I don't know where you nampak ni.
Can you close the book? Okay, now back again. A little bit back. We don't see you. Okay. Now.
Okay. Anyway, this book is entitled Spirituality and Sustainable Development. It is written by a group of scholars in IUM that fills in the lacuna that Suraya was talking about. We felt there is not enough discussion on spirituality and sustainable development, and therefore this book talks about the need to bring spirituality into our discussion. Back to the same thing I was talking to you about. You know, we lack, so a scholar who studies sustainable development and do not have the perspective on spirituality, then from our point of view, it may not be complete. And in fact, our university, IUM, Alhamdulillah, is thinking of creating another sustainable development goal, which is Sustainable Development Goal 18, which is spirituality. So to answer your question, yes, it is important for us to talk about issues that is happening around us, but what is the paradigm, what is the framework, what will be the perspective that you want to bring in? And this is where I'm saying that we have not lost our knowledge as far as developing new concepts on education is concerned. We still can contribute, but we must not be, quote unquote, be limited to what is defined by the Western paradigm. We must have the courage. Remember the word I use is you must have the courage. You must have the critical thinking to expand that so that it fits into the understanding of the Islamic perspective of other things that we are facing today. It could be the solution. It may be the solution. But until and unless we think along those lines, then there is no hope to find new perspective of the issues that we are facing over a period of time. This long time period, it's not that yesterday's problem, has been there for hundreds of years. Beginning of the Industrial Revolution is where the beginning of pollution, climate change, global warming, 300 years ago. But because we don't have the perspective as a Muslim to look at it from a different point of view, then we have lost sort of the contribution that we need to make as far as Islam is concerned and the Muslim Ummah. I hope I've answered your question, Suraya.
I think you have answered the question superbly.
Thank you very much.
Okay, I want to read another question.
Yep.
Okay, by Sheikh Ismail. Okay, Assalamualaikum. What are your thoughts on the notion that we are superb in starting but not finishing? Only we claim our glorious past. What is your views on that?
This is typical. Yeah. This is typical of Muslims because we have lost our moral, responsibility. Yeah. We can only claim what other people has done, right? And we have not sort of add in to what they have done after that. So in other words, we are no longer that original thinker that we talked about. We are no longer that critical person that we talked about. And I give you a very simple example. How many of us are critical over the things that we see around us? Yeah. How many of us as Muslims are critical in making comments, for example? If we talk about our education system, yeah, I always come back to falsafah pendidikan kebangsaan. And in its core, talks about kepercayaan dan kepatuhan kepada Tuhan. Yeah? And its core, it talks about kepercayaan dan kepatuhan kepada Tuhan. How many of us has voiced out and say, look, is our education system spiritually sound in the context of the falsafah pendidikan kebangsaan? I'm not saying that we need to convert into religious schools, yeah, but are we basically God-centric? Ya, walaupun kita bercakap dalam rukun negara, yang pertama is kepercayaan kepada Tuhan, right? But is our education system realigned into that? And to understand kepercayaan kepada Tuhan in the context of the falsafah pendidikan kebangsaan yang mengata at the end of the day we want to produce manusia yang seimbang dan harmonis. That is, I think, the context that I want to bring about. Yeah, when you want to make these changes, and what sort of thinking that we want to bring into this, and do we have the courage to take it, to say it? Sometimes it may not be popular, but the truths are sometimes not popular. Yeah, just macam pill lah. You want to be treated. The pill sometimes are bitter. But if you don't swallow the pill, you will never get rid of your disease. But are we prepared to swallow this pill, which is bitter in its nature, as an academic, not as a politician? I'm not talking about a politician. In other words, when we talked about whatever we want to talk about, there are enough evidence, academic evidence to support us. It's not because we want to be anti this, anti that, pro this and pro that, but because we want to get into the real substance of what education is all about. That is menghasilkan manusia seimbang dan harmonis. That is the issue. So failing that, we can only quote what the past is all about. And quoting the past will not change the future. Yeah? Quoting the past will not change the future. In fact, it gives you a lot more depression. Orang dulu boleh buat bila tak ada komputer, bila tak ada kertas, there's no huge universities, right? Yet they can do. Al-Kindi write 200 books, mind you. How many books have we written? Yeah, these are issues that I think we need. The moment we realize what our responsibility are as scholars, as Muslim scholars, then we begin to understand what is the role that we need to play. And that becomes no compromise. And we have listed you the 8 or 9 things that shapes a Muslim scholar. Are we into this? Are we moving into that? Or are we just complacent the way we are because we've got what we want and the ministry has recognized it, gaji pun dah ada, kerja pun dah ada, and that's it. and it becomes an 8 to 5 academic rather than a 24/7 academics. And knowledge does not stop, and therefore we should be seeking knowledge all the time. So those are issues that I think we need to think about the moment we know what the past is all about. The past glory is something that we are proud of, but can we replicate it? Can we repeat that? Kalau orang dulu boleh buat dalam keadaan yang serba tidak ada, mengapa orang sekarang tidak boleh buat? When everybody has got a handphone in their hand. Yeah. Knowledge di ujung apa? Knowledge at the tip of your finger. Yeah. Why can't we do it? And that is a question that we need to think about and ponder and reflect of where we want to go to reclaim back, if the so-called the lost world of the Muslim Ummah, inshallah.
Okay, Prof, are you okay for another question?
I will stay with you until midnight if you want to.
Okay.
Yes, please.
Okay, let me read.
You're finding a difficult question for me, huh?
Yeah, I'm finding a difficult question for you to answer.
Okay. Okay.
Well, the people here gave commentaries, but not a question.
You can read the comments so other people can share. The comment is also constructive. I can comment on the comment.
Okay, I want to read a comment by Salina Afendi.
Okay.
The Muslim scholars of...
Where is she from?
Come again?
Where is she from? In university ataupun Salina?
Oh, I'm not sure because it's just a Facebook profile. So, and it says a comment, so I don't know where is she from.
Okay.
But I don't know. Okay, the comment is, the Muslim scholars of the golden era, first and foremost, had a strong faith and deep relationship with Allah. The knowledge and ingenuity comes with the barakah of Allah. Perhaps modern scholars need to reflect on their spiritual standing with Allah.
Yeah, I think that's why I say just now. They kata there's no victory other than from Allah.
Yes.
It's not from, it's not from the university, it's not from even yourself, dia punya tawaduk tu lain. Here we've got a case where we do one article, then you say, oh, this is my article, you don't, this is copyrighted, I'll sue you if you those kind of things. Mana ada barakahnya? Because our mind is now shaped by a different paradigm. When we get something, we become very arrogant. I've written a book and the world must know about this book, and things like that. We do not have that humility anymore. Right? Lain nak mengatakan ini semua Allah SWT yang buat. I'm just a kind of a conduit that delivers this. Yeah. And we get into this competition sometimes. That's not so bad, but sometimes we get into competition with ourselves, with our own colleague. Ilmu ada kedekut, tak mau bagi pada orang, takut orang ni become better than us. So these are the shaping of minds and attitudes of the scholars that we have today. And that's why the world, look at the vaccine. Everybody now wants to produce a vaccine because why? Because everybody wants to make money. The Chinese, the Americans, whoever, yeah. And at the end of the day, they will use this as a resource to make money, an economic thing, rather than a humanitarian thing. I would have wished that there's some Muslims who do this and they say, I'm giving this for free so that we save humanity. That kind of attitude tak ada dah. Because education is shaped to be quote unquote an income earner. We bring international students sini pasal apa? Because we want to create revenue. Yang miskin pun orang kita suruh bayar juga, tak boleh berhentikan dia. And education has become another source of income rather than a source of barakah. I think we have been promised by, I think the Prophet do mention, kalau tahu satu ayat, ajar satu ayat. The Prophet doesn't say tahu satu ayat, you patent it first, copyright it, and then sell it to somebody else and then make money out of it. That is not Islamic attitude. So we are at a crossroad of whose culture are we taking now? Who defines what? Can we reshape this? Yeah, all these books that you talk about Al-Kindi, yang Ibn Sina, they are all not copyrighted. Nobody copyrights this book, and it's used for hundreds and hundreds of years. Kalau nak kira copyright ni dah banyaklah duitnya. Yeah? But we are not. So can we get rid of these copyright issues, which is basically a capitalistic monopoly, so that we can get the knowledge to be distributed to people who cannot afford it? Kalau orang the Western world doesn't want to do it, can OIC do it? Can Muslim community do it? We are talking about open access. We are talking about, open resource. Why can't our work be done into this? I know some of my European friends, kalau they nak publish open access. Dia kata, I don't want to take a single cent because my research is already supported by the government. It's a taxpayers' money. Why do I need to make money from out of taxpayers' money? So these are new attitudes that we need to think about as Muslim scholars, so that we can make manfaatkan ilmu itu supaya dia dapat barakah kepada kita. And that is a thinking that I think needs to be radicalized dalam konteks kita bercakap in whether the lost world ataupun tidak. Tapi kalau kita pun bersaing dengan dia, ranking pun kita masuk, kita kena bayar juga, I think then we are no better than them. Yeah, and we deserve to be where we are because we have not following the kind of things that the Western, the former scholars are doing, I'm afraid. All right?
All right. I was about to ask you about the why other universities are trying to achieve the research university status, but UIA seems to not want that title. But from your explanation, I kind of get why UIA is not moving towards that goal, but rather the UIA wants to portray itself as a sustainability institution.
Yeah.
Okay. Maybe one more comment.
Yes.
From Jumaine Mapinga. I'm sorry if I pronounce your name wrong. So she said that she or he, I'm not sure. I agree with Professor from a well-analytic academic work. May Allah bless him. We have not lost knowledge. It is just in store. My point of view is that the Muslim Ummah need to work out inspiring our generations through not only uncovering Muslim efforts in education, but much from investing on media to work out the day-to-day generic misconceptions that hide the beauty of Islam.
Perfect.
That is the comment.
That's perfect. I think anything that's beautiful belongs to Islam. And this is another thing. Yeah. So sometimes we talk about Islamic science. Yeah. As the Christians do not talk about Christian science. Neither the Buddhists talk about Buddhist science. Neither the Hindu talks about Hindu science. Yeah. Anything that's beautiful, as far as I'm concerned, it is Islamic science. We don't have to call it Islamic science to be Islamic science. Right? Good food, it could be made by an Italian, but it could be an Islamic food. Halal, makan bagus, dia ada tayyiban, halal, barakah, Islamic. So we don't have to have an Islamic Italian food about Islam. Kalau tidak ada Islamic, then it's not Islam. I think we are caught in that kind of stereotyping. We want to have an Islamic car. Somebody tell, why don't we have an Islamic car? I say, what is an Islamic car? Dia mungkin jalannya menghadap kiblah je kot. Dia tak boleh corner kiri kanan, dia mesti kiblah saja because dia Islamic car. So we have put ourselves in a box that we begin to dissociate with knowledge that is actually Islamic, but without an Islamic label. I understand we need to clean up some of the ideas and in some of the sciences, misalnya, that is accepted. But to label everything into that, yeah, from what I understand is everything that is beautiful, that is, within the creation of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is for us to use. And it is in that sense Islamic. without having to label it Islamic. Now, in that sense, I sometimes be very cynical. Where is the Islamic toilet? You know? So we go into a toilet which is not Islamic, okay pula. I should not go into a toilet which is not Islamic. I just want to go into Islamic toilet because I'm so fascinated about anything Islamic. So we are not focused, we are on two minds and take things which is convenient to us. When it's convenient, kita kata ini Islamic, tak convenient, kita kata bukan Islamic, and we make a whole fuss out of it. And we lose time, we lose what they call opportunity to take this back as we want to claim it in the so-called lost education opportunities that we talked about. Yeah, so I agree with her. We must be open enough to, and the word tolerant itu. Yeah? We must be tolerant enough to know what is within the Islamic ambit that we can use without having to be very obsessed about the word Islamic in itself. Sometimes the word Islamic in there too, they use other people just to entice you. Tengok-tengok dalamnya ada alkohol juga. Because we are so engrossed with it, people use this as a kind of a mechanism to deceive you because they know you are so engrossed with it. So issues of this nature, saya rasa, is a bigger issues that I'm very thankful that you have this discussion. But I hope this discussion does not stop here. The question is, what do we do next? What do we scholars do next? Particularly young scholars like you. Do we redefine some of this? Do you have a different mechanism to think of it? Do you build another platform that we can reclaim what we need to reclaim now that we know what the situation is all about? Right? If we can do that, inshallah, I think we are moving into one step ahead, perhaps not as close as we were during the Andalusian time, but at least our mindset begin to change into something which is more enlightening, more positive. And inshallah, I think we will get the barakah of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Only with the barakah we will succeed. Until then, I think we have to struggle very much so moving forward. Yeah. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much for the very enlightening session. Before we end this session, I want to a little bit of summarize that quoting what a professor has said, we have not lost it, that is Islamic education, but another civilization has developed it. So it is our job as the new generation, as the current generation, to quote unquote take back what is ours. Okay. So ladies and gentlemen, I would like to thank our sponsors for sponsoring our session, our MADAD Ummah Summit, co-organized by Philandure, MADAD, IIUM, in collaboration with Charity Right, Sabat, Intac, Visit Alay, EGG Tanzania, Khidmatgaar, and Jsit Indonesia.